So I look at the body as a piece of technology. And our nervous system and our physical body, when we have these big astrological events, we're getting an influx of light from our solar system, which is containing packets of information and data, just like a computer is grabbing data from the internet. That light then comes into our body and it begins to activate things that are already held in our DNA and activate dormant things that exist in our body, things that need to be cleared so that we can go to our next state of frequency. We actually need to do that nervous system work and clear the trauma and create resiliency in our nervous system, because every time we get these downloads of energy, the nervous system experiences that and it can't tell the difference between that and a trauma, because it's just a system receiving a code and it's activated.
Hello, Guy here. Welcome to my podcast. And if you're new to my channel, welcome as well. I really appreciate your time. My beautiful guest today is Katie Sutton. And I truly love this conversation. I know I say about all my episodes, but there's a huge amount of value in the things that she shares today. Not only practical stuff, but things that are going on in humanity. She's an incredible healer in her own right, and we get into the topic obviously about her journey and how she come to be and what she's passionate about now, but also this ascension window that I guess we're all in at the moment, which I find a very fascinating conversation, how that's affecting us and things that we can do about it in our lives to support ourselves as we continue through this thing called life. Fabulous. If you are listening on YouTube, be sure if you enjoy the conversation, just hit the subscribe, hit the like button, or even more importantly, share it with a loved one or friend. It's a great way of supporting the podcast and continuing to help get it out there as well. And of course, let me know where you are in the world. Drop a comment. I'm always fascinated to know how people are coming in from all over the planet, watching these conversations, which just warms my heart dearly. And what was the last thing I was going to say? If you want to know what we're up to in 2025, there are links below. We're going to be in Bali, Croatia, Australia, gosh, you name it. And there's also a 7 days of meditation that's free, which is a great place to start as well. Anyway, enjoy this podcast with Katie. It's truly beautiful. Much love, and I'll see you soon. Katie, welcome to the podcast, my lovely.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to see where this conversation goes today, because even off air, we've probably touched about 6 topics already. And I'm sure we'll try and cover as much as we can in the next 45 minutes, an hour. But a nice question I always like to start the podcast is, if you were, say, on an airplane or an intimate dinner party, you sat next to a stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, how would you respond?
It's always such a complicated question for me. And so I tend to start with saying that I do trauma healing work with people, because that is something, especially now post pandemic, that people have an understanding of. And then if they ask questions after that, I go into what that entails, which is energy healing, vibrational healing, channeled messages, connecting them to their higher self and source spirit self, bringing through whatever is necessary for that person to kind of pull the energetic thread that might be keeping them stuck in all the houses of their life. I also like to say that I'm kind of like Nancy Drew, a detective, because when I'm in session with people, I am taking a lot of information in from them and from their guides and kind of finding the commonalities that are linking things together in their energy field that are keeping them stuck. So I do kind of feel like I'm a synchronistic detective as well.
Yeah, I love it. You could even open up with that. I'm a synchronistic detective. And
yeah, that's a great opener, right? They'll be like, what is that?
I'm curious, like, just to dive in a little bit. You mentioned the word trauma, which clearly I think we all suffer from at some level or have done.
Yeah.
How much do you think that trauma that we're unaware of, and where is it coming from? Like this life, past life, ancestral, inherited through, like from your journey of working with people and your own experience, how much is that playing a role in everything?
I'd say about 90% of everything that we experience that is stuck in our life, whether that be relationships, work difficulties, money in abundance, health stuff, is some sort of stuck trauma that is either in our energy field or been stored in our body. And I might even say sometimes for people, it might be 95 to 99% of the things. And the things in our outside world that we keep experiencing over and over are reflectors of that internalized trauma. And when I look at somebody's energy field, I see it multidimensionally. I see time more like a pancake rather than a linear thing. So I can see their past lives that are happening that are bringing that trauma in, the ancestral connections that are bringing that trauma in, as well as what's happened from their childhood into this now moment, even all the way back to pre birth times in this lifetime. And so when somebody comes to me and they have something chronic going on, I look at all of those things at once. That doesn't mean in every session we address every single one of those categories, but I always look in all of those houses. And the stickiest things that I find for people often actually check all of those boxes. And what happens in the healing process is, they might go into something that they're trying to heal chronically that's physical. They address it from one perspective, maybe through therapy or through supplementation or just,
Mm.
natural support with their physical body or even traditional medicine. And they come to me and they say, well, I'm still stuck in this pattern. And then I see all of these multidimensional layers that are attached into that particular issue that they're having. And once we clear that, all of the work that they've been doing to heal on the physical, for example, might land all at once, kind of like that last domino that falls over.
That's massive. 99%. Like, and most people are not even aware of it. I know I wasn't. I
No.
was walking around complaining
Yeah.
about the world, the government, the structure in my 20s. It's all them, and having no
Yeah.
idea the trauma I was carrying inside of me. Like, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And I got to pick you up on something. When you say you see it, what do you
Mm-hmm.
see? Is that like through the third eye? Are your eyes closed, like when you engage, or is it like through feedback of energy?
Yeah, I love that question so much because when I first started in my psychic healing journey, I went to psychic school for
Oh,
3
wow.
years to try to heal myself. And we were doing really intense healings every weekend with the public. Like they would just call in on a conference call and we'd have to read their energy and do healings. And for the longest time, it was all just felt in my body because I'm deeply empathic. And so I have a clear cognizance, which is a deep knowing, like it just comes up as a knowing and awareness, and then a deep feeling, a clear sentience. And over the years, as I've really worked on my boundaries and my empathy, now my third eye is ready to open because the third eye doesn't want to open when we're in a state of constriction or trauma or fear for most people. Some people come into this lifetime with a very open clairvoyance perspective, but most don't. And so now that I'm in my later years of doing healing, as I've been practicing this for about 12 years now, I can see more, but it actually kind of comes in all at once. And sometimes I do hear and I do smell and I do taste. So it could come in any number of ways. And if
Wow.
you were to ask me in any one moment which one comes in first, I couldn't tell you because they're all happening at once for me. And it comes in as an energetic download, like a packet of information, like a computer packet of information that comes through on the internet, right? And we download it and then we can see all the pictures and the words. It's kind of like that for me. I say that my intuition connects me to the esoteric internet. That's what I like to call it. And I'm pulling information from all the different realms and from my higher self connection as well as the person's higher self connection that I'm working with.
Wow, that's amazing. And I find that fascinating because I only hold groups. Like, we'll be in Melbourne this weekend to nearly 100 people in a group, right? And it's big
Mm-hmm.
energy. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I've had to adapt over the 6 years and constantly grow that space and that boundary, and being able to hold myself like unwavering no matter what the energy is doing. But I haven't, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll see it a little bit. Like when I close my eyes, I can see
Mm-hmm.
that energy, but not really the direct feedback yet, which is, I always feel it in my body with what's going on within the.
Yeah. I love it clairvoyant because I will have a knowing and a feeling of like an ascended master or something that's coming in, and they will actually see them show up beside me. So it's nice, we can play off of each other's gifts. And I think we all kind of have a different flavor of what our gifts are in this lifetime. But yeah, for sure, mine comes through as feeling first and foremost most of the time, which can be a lot, that if you're a body processor, as I call it, can be a lot. And you have to expand your capacity in your nervous system and your physical body to be able to hold that much energy. And really, we don't want to hold it. We want to kind of taste it as it moves through our field and then allow ourselves to kind of be the hollow bone, if you will, and let that particular energy just flow
Mhm.
through, experience it so we can read it and then kind of come back into our own experience of it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an art, isn't it?
Yeah.
On that question of then the trauma and the exploration, what are you when you're working with people? Then is it then allowing them for their soul to guide them to what's ready to be revealed? Is that how it works? And I'm thinking of the listeners as well that are.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my primary objective when working with people on trauma healing, I think we can get a little trapped in endless cycles of clearing and releasing and trauma healing. And it's such a buzzword these
Mm,
days, and we can kind of get stuck there and trying to reach a place of perfection. That's not what I'm after. I'm kind of trying to, through my conversation with the person when they show up for session and then what I see in their energy field, assess where they're most blocked and what trauma is attached into or creating that block so that we can kind of move that out of the way so that their center channel can open and they can download more of their connection to source and self. And as that light comes in and it can make its way through their entire energy field and kind of drop in their root, then the things that they're wanting to experience in their daily life can start to physicalize, because in their energy centers there may be blocks that are coordinated or connected to those traumas, and as that's cleared, that light can then integrate, more of their consciousness can come in, and then they can manifest and be empowered in that
mm.
manifestation.
It's certainly a journey, isn't it? I always pull myself back because there's this need of one for people to ascend without actually rooting
Mm.
themselves and being here and enjoying the fruits of what Earth can offer as well.
Yeah, that's been a big journey for me because, being somebody that feels things in my body, I had a lot of chronic health issues before I realized what was happening. And so I spent a lot of time in my childhood and my early years being outside of my
Yeah.
body. And so making peace with this vessel and realizing that it's actually about being in the body and being here now, as Ram Dass said, right? Being here now in this moment, activating into this physical experience. And then from there, as that expands, we have a deeper connection that we can then create with the higher realms and with Mother Earth.
Wow. Yeah. Well, just diving into your past a little bit then, because I was literally want to go on to
Mhm.
the collective evolution as well, but let's go, we'll dive into the past for a sec.
Okay.
So, your
Okay.
chronic sufferings, the things like you said, when you realize you're living energies outside the body, which is what we see a lot. Like there's a
Yes.
disassociation would you put it down to trauma, those chronic conditions and ailments that you were suffering your own, or would it be something else?
Yes, I think I came into this lifetime as a very empowered soul, as many do, with a lot of desire to experience unconditional love and connection. And the family of origin that I came into, by design, my soul was like, okay, well, let's bring you into a family that's a little disconnected from their emotions and let's make you super empathic. And make you feel everything and process it for them. But I didn't know that I was doing that. I grew up in a very rural area. I was kind of isolated from people. I mean, of course, I had friends in school, but I grew up on the side of a mountain with animals and my parents. And so I learned very quickly that my connection to Mother Earth and the unseen realms was my safe place. And I think that coming in through that experience kind of opened me up. And then I also learned, because I got so overwhelmed and didn't have the tools, to shut down. And so then I went very quickly into the corporate space after college and thought, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm going to be CEO of a technology company one day. That's what I thought I was going to be. And I went down that path, and then I got chronically ill. And then it became almost a necessity for me to figure out what was going on inside of my body and why. And that's when I started to uncover my empathy. I started to uncover all of the trauma that I had suppressed as a child and all of the emotions that I had suppressed from kind of being in an experience in my childhood where people weren't as connected to their emotions as they needed to be. And just kind of started to uncover all of that slowly but surely.
Wow.
And of course, it's a spiral, right? We're always working through things.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you like, how did that healing journey start to begin for you? Was there signs from the universe? Was it insights? Oh, let's do this retreat. Let's see this intuitive healer. Let's explore this. Like, what did you
Sure.
find effective for you personally to help you through?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, when I was a child, I was very interested in alternative things. So I remember watching DVDs from Drunvalo Melchizedek when I was a kid, probably
Wow.
like 10 or 12. And That's a very advanced amount of information to bring in for a 10 to 12-year-old, but I was enamored by sacred
Hmm.
geometry. My mom exposed me to a lot of alternative things because she would take me to herbal medicine making classes and psychic animal communication classes and channelings and things like that. So I was always interested in it. But for whatever reason, my soul needed to have that experience of going into the muggle world, as I call it, down that corporate path. And so once I got into corporate America, and I started with chronic migraines, and then I got shingles at 22, and then it became chronic fatigue, and then I got Graves' disease, which is a thyroid condition. And about the time that I had Graves' disease, I kind of looked up from all of that and kind of woke up and said, I've got to go back to some of the things that I knew as a kid. As a kid, I practiced yoga and meditation and was really connected to nature. And so those were the first three things that I started with. And as I got back into yoga and meditation, it was enough to take the stress off, or the edge off of the stress, if you will, and be a coping mechanism. But it wasn't until I went to Boulder, Colorado in, I think it was 2014, and I had been having a lot of chronic pain. And I happened into a psychic healing studio school that's run there in Boulder, and I got a free 15-minute healing. And the things that she said to me just changed my life. And they landed so deeply in my soul that I said, okay, I've got to sign up for classes and I've got to figure this out. And so I started down that path, and I spent 3 years studying in that institute and doing healings with the public, practicing all over conference calls. Zoom wasn't a thing when I was doing that. And I thought, okay, this is just for me. And then it became obvious that I needed to start to offer that work to others. And in 2017, I got laid off from my corporate job 2 weeks after hiring a business coach to start my Zen Within Academy business. And the universe kind of kicked me out and said, okay, she's done with that path, and dropped me into my healing path, my healing arts path. And then I've been here ever
Wow.
since.
It's the same time I had to step away from my company. Like
Mm.
literally that period of time. And then you kind of like, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah, and I think it was around 2012 when my health stuff started to kick up. And, a lot of people move through massive shifts starting in
Mhm.
2012, but it took us several years to kind of process what had shifted. And so I think that's why a lot of people around that 2017 timeframe might have stepped out of some things and into a new
Into a new
timeline.
timeline. Wow, that is absolutely
Mhm.
fascinating. And did you find it okay to let go of your corporate identity? Were you
Mm.
far enough down in that period when you got laid off? Or
It was scary. It was so interesting because I was really good at my corporate job. I was somebody who got promoted every 6 to 8 months throughout my career. And the one of the reasons why I was so good is because, looking back, I was really intuitive and I could read people and I could figure out how to navigate really complex situations and problem solve and process orient very well. And so that part of me, whenever I got laid off, it was kind of unexpected because I had a 5-year plan of how I was going to build my business and how I was going to make that transition and, make it easeful and be low risk. And so it was very shocking. And actually, a couple of days after I got laid off, we were supposed to be at a yoga festival, and that we go to every year up in Virginia. And we got to the yoga festival, and I stepped out of the RV that we were renting into a hole and twisted my ankle. And so for 4 days, I had to sit at this yoga festival and do no yoga and just sit in the grief and all of the
Mm.
anger and the frustration and all the things that got triggered, because I got let go from my job. I was an A student. I was always the top of my class. I was always the best at everything I did. So getting laid off was kind of like a shock to the system. It just wasn't what I expected. Of course, hindsight, I can look back and say that's exactly what needed to happen. But I spent probably the first 8 months kind of feeling the fear of, can I build this business? Can I support myself? And I was super fortunate to have a very close friend in my life who looked at me and said, I will give you a contracting job. You can do some consulting work for me and you can keep building your business and we'll make sure that you're okay. And about 8 months into that, I just heard from my guides, okay, you're complete with that and you can now do full time. And it was a beautiful, smooth, easeful transition when I surrendered.
Mm.
But in the resistance in the beginning, it was tough. And there were a lot of lessons and a lot of things to learn. But, looking back, I can see that it was exactly as it was meant to be.
Yeah, it's in the resistance the pain is when we're stopping life flowing through us, isn't it? And it's,
Yeah, in all
yeah,
things.
in all areas of our life. It doesn't even have to be that. It's, yeah, it's pretty wild when you could, because even now, sometimes I think, am I going nuts? I mean, or is it, or we're just flowing with it? Like, it's very easy to let that outside noise in sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
question I had for you as well. Then you spoke about guides. We are getting there, but you keep triggering more questions for me and how you connect.
It's fine.
Have you met them, or do you see them? How did you first start to connect with them? Because I have no doubt people listening to this will want to connect to that more and more, and how they receive that information. I'm curious how you do it.
Yeah. And so I always tell people when they're asking me the question of connection and how they can get more connected to their intuitive senses and their guides, I tell them three things. One is slow down, two is be quiet, and three is pay attention. Because we are getting signs and signals all the time, but we're in such a doing mode most of the time that we're negating them. And so my nudges would come in as knowings, and it wasn't coming from a particular guide, at that time when I was in the corporate space, it was just a knowing. And the more that I leaned into listening to them and following them, the greater they got. And after I studied at the Psychic Institute, they were really asking us in that school to connect to our own intuitive knowledge and our own channel. And I expected after I graduated from that program that I was going to go into their channeling program, and then it didn't actually open. But as soon as I graduated, my channel opened and I started getting downloads from Ascended Masters and other guides from the star realms and beyond. And so it was something that just kind of happened after I got more into my own practice and my own connection to my higher self and my intuitive wisdom. And so when I went to Mount Shasta the first time, I think it was in 2018, is when my 12th dimensional healing modality downloaded in my body. I was doing a healing session for a friend, and my vision opened up and I started getting all these downloads about unity consciousness and Christ consciousness and the 12th layer of our auric field and our 12 chakra system. Like all this stuff came in at once. And a collective stepped forward and said, we're the 12th dimensional collective. We're the creator beings. We are here to work with you in teaching people how to connect to us and teaching people how to connect to unity consciousness so you can help the planet to ascend. And I was like, okay. And I went home and I sat with that for a few weeks and started downloading content for my school and curriculum to teach people how to connect to their intuitive knowing and their guides. And from there, as I started doing more healing work, more collectives started moving forward. So now I probably have maybe 15 to 18 different groups of guides and collectives and ascended masters that I work with, including Mother Earth in her energy, which is one of the more recent ones that have come online.
Wow. Wow. Okay. There's a lot in there. The first thing I want to pick you up on is you mentioned the 12th dimension and the 12 chakra system. And that really pricked my curiosity this morning when going through your website, because I remember, and I've still listened to it now and then, is an audiobook, and it's in physical I think it's called Bringers of the Dawn. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's the Pleiad. They're channeling the
Yeah, I
Pleiadians in
think it
that book,
was
perhaps. Yeah.
channeled in the late 70s or early 80s. And
Yes. Hmm.
Matt, my business partner, like he put me onto it a couple of years ago because they gave it to him at an acting school, I think, which is of all random things.
Mm.
And they talk about the 12 chakra system. So every morning I'd go in my sauna. This was before I had my second child, but I'd go in my sauna and start tuning into those 12 chakras. And I'm curious to know, is the 12th dimensional system related to each chakra, or are they separate things, or what have you learned or downloaded about the 12 chakras? Because for most people, they only think there's seven, right?
Right. Yeah. Most people, especially when we study Eastern medicine and Eastern tradition, we're very familiar with the body chakras, right? Those 7 body chakras. But when we start to expand beyond the body is when we get into 8 through 12, right? So we've got the Earth Star chakra, which is beneath our feet. That is kind of our master grounder connection to the earth. It goes deeper than our root chakra connection, which most people think of as our grounding connection to the earth. The Earth Star chakra grounds the whole energy body and the whole toroidal field to Mother Gaia. And then as we go up the chakra system, we have our 11th and 12th chakras, our 10th, 11th, and 12th chakras above the head. We have a causal chakra at the back of the head, which is our connection to spirit and our guides and the divine feminine as pure consciousness. And then we have 11, which is our soul star chakra, which is our connection to our past lives. And then we have our 12th chakra, which is our stellar gateway, which is kind of our connection to source and higher self. And when we start to expand into that, we get into the subtle realms of energy. We get into those other timelines, those other dimensions. And I do see that there is a correlation between the chakra system and the dimensions that we move through. And, everything happens as a fractal of everything else in our universe. So the dimensions are related to the chakra system, and the chakra system is related to the dimensions. And everything kind of moves hand in hand in our system that we have here on this planet.
Wow. And then, like through the main seven chakras, there's obviously, and I always look at the central spine, is because there's so much energy moving up
Mhm.
and down the central column. That's where we hold a lot of energetic trauma as well. And through them, do
Mhm.
these other chakras have trauma, or is it more a case of just crystallizing them into form? I'm trying to think of the right words, but with you.
Yeah, it's both. When I look at people's energy fields, I get pictures of the things that are stored in their different energy centers, and I see and feel and notice the ones that are constricted. And then I kind of imagine it opening up like a book, and I can see the story that's written in that energy center. And so the body chakras, contain a lot of information from this lifetime and other lifetimes. And then when we get into those upper chakras, that's when we really get into those expanded timeline views, right, of past lives and ancestral karma and those kinds of things. But we can hold any of that information throughout the energy body. And sometimes it's very important that the guides will tell me, okay, it's this energy center that they're working on. And sometimes it doesn't matter where it's housed, it just needs to be cleared. So it kind of depends on the person that shows up and what they need to hear and what they need to work with to do the clearings in their own field too.
Okay. And how would you then describe your 12th dimensional healing then?
Yeah, so I always open the space. I set a prayer of intention and unity. I try to clear the field. I do a scan of their entire energy body, so that whole 12 chakra system, and I get images from their soul about what they're working on, and I share that. And that pretty much always gets the conversation going. And then I'm kind of like a detective, so we have a back and forth kind of an interview. I take a lot of questions and ask a lot of questions and take a lot of notes. And then there's a very clear picture that starts to form in my intuitive knowing of how all of the things that are going on in their life are connected. And it's kind of hard to describe because it just happens in my body where I can see the place or the trigger or the trauma that I need to kind of gently go in and begin to clear so that the other houses of their life that are maybe also stuck because of that can start to unwind. And as that energy clears from their system and their chakra channel, it then clears from their physical experience in their life, whether that's their relationships, their, purpose driven work, maybe it's their physical health, their resources and their abundance. So it's all connected into one. And, as I start to pull those threads, what they often feel in their field is they get lighter. They might release grief, they might release shame. There may be some unconscious energy from even that their mother carried when they were in utero that needs to be cleared. And as these things start to dismantle, they start to feel the opening and the lightness immediately. And that kind of creates a trigger inside of them that says, oh, maybe these things that I've been struggling with are actually a reflection of my inward environment. And when they come to that knowing, it empowers things to begin to shift in their external environment as well.
Yeah. The arrows finally point inward. What is it within me, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
the outer
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Talking about the outer world, it's very easy to get caught up in the noise. I mean, it's election year. I don't even know what it'd be like in the States right now, but boy, because I don't watch TV, I avoid that kind of stuff. I'm very conscious of what information I let filter in. But most
Yeah.
people are walking around, they're not even aware of trauma or their chakra systems or the things we're talking about right now. What would you like to speak to about it? Because I know you do monthly messages, you channel information
Mhm.
in. We've just gone
Mhm.
through Lionsgate and Eclipse with the
Mhm.
portal opening and
Mhm.
that, and I find all these things very
Yeah.
fascinating at the moment. But where do you think we're heading into 2025 and beyond?
Mhm.
What's been your, I guess, information you've been receiving and sharing so far on all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, specifically, I'd really like to speak to this Eclipse portal that we're closing out. I think we're recording this today, and I think it closes out on the 2nd of October. and this intensity that is present. I'm in the Southeast, and there has been a devastating hurricane that's come through and just wiped out literally towns that I visited as a child. They're just completely gone. And so they've just kind of been wiped out. And so that devastation that we're seeing in the earthly realms and the physical realm is, I think, an external manifestation of the major upheaval that we're going through energetically as a collective. The level of polarity that we're seeing come to the surface is getting more and more activated and more intense and chaotic because, if you've ever been through a healing process in your body, right? You've ever gotten a virus, you've ever gotten sick, you tend to get worse before you come out the other side and get better, right? Your fever spikes, it feels really dire, your body's processing as much as it can, and then you have that moment of breakthrough where everything starts to normalize and come into a new status quo. And we're kind of in that breaking point here at this end of 2024 cycle. This particular eclipse feels like we are working through things that are ancient in terms of polarity and division. And we also have a shift in our masculine and feminine polarity on the planet, where there is this rise of the empowered feminine and there is a healing of the masculine, the disempowered kind of wounded masculine that is starting to happen. And that's all being reflected inwardly and outwardly in our environment. So when we're seeing political events and, environmental disasters and chaotic things happening in the news, right, and in the world around us, it is a reflection of this energy shift that we're going through. And it's crucial, I think, that people are working to kind of harness and protect, if you will. That's maybe not the best word, but just hold their frequency. And so, staying tuned in enough to know what's going on, but not to become overwhelmed. And everybody has a different capacity for that. And so our work right now is to continue to stay in a unified, centered place while the chaos is happening so that we can be of service in the world for those that are not tuned into this energy. The average person who isn't tuned into their spiritual process is going through the same chaotic things. They're just doing it in a very less empowered way, right? They're not maybe in that proactive state where they know how to clear energy and they know how to look at things in their external environment and see that it's a mirror of their internal landscape. And so they're all moving through the ascension process just as we are, just in different ways, right? Different timelines, if you will. And so our job, I think, as light workers, wayshowers, people who are doing our spiritual work, is to really cultivate that unified expression inwardly so that we can come with compassion and love in an empowered state to those who might just be waking up to this possibility.
Yeah, as opposed to throwing rocks at what's happening and being in a place of division, right? And it's them over there or
Yeah.
not those over
Yeah.
there, and this is mine,
Yeah.
which we certainly get brainwashed into behaving like at the end of the day,
Mm.
you know, which is not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the powers that be prefer it that way. Like it's a lot easier to control people when they're at each other's throats. And so I think if we want things on this planet to change, we have to really cultivate unity and work towards that so that it can
Yeah.
shift.
Where do you think this is all heading? So yeah, even with the
Yeah.
rise of energies and frequencies, like, are we going to see it all in our lifetime? Is it going to happen next year? Like, what are your feelings around this?
Yeah, I feel like we're in a 20-year window from 2012 to 2032. So, my understanding of our move to fifth dimensional frequency and fifth dimensional consciousness is that we're going to stay in a physical body, right? Now, there are some channels that believe that we're going to split timelines and some people are going to go one place and other people are going to go another. It's not going to be like that, I don't think, at least from my perspective and what the guides share with me. We're all going to be here together and we will each have the opportunity to claim our heaven on earth, whatever that means for us as individuals. So I call that our new earth vibration. And, it doesn't mean that we're going to all be going back to, tribal living or communal living in the way it was in the past. We're going to take our technology with us and we're going to find new ways to become connected to the earth and have our technological advancements. I think we're going to blend the best of all of these societies that have existed in ancient times, like Lemurian and Atlantis, and even in those kind of native traditions. We're going to blend all of that with our modern day technology and come into a new frequency, a new state of being as a collective consciousness. And so I personally don't believe that it's going to be some kind of solar flash event or some kind of apocalyptic event. Now, will there be chaotic and difficult things that we have to move through as a collective? Absolutely. But I don't see it as a mass awakening event. I think it's going to be something that happens over time. But I do believe that those of us that have been kind of actively working in this spiritual environment for, the last since 2012 or even earlier are going to have a major shift at the end of this year. Whereas we move into 2025, we're going to feel that kind of heaven on earth vibration that we've been trying to cultivate for ourselves is more able to actually be anchored in our physical reality. And I'm seeing that in people's energy fields where I've maybe been working with them for a while, and all of a sudden they're actually now inhabiting their root chakra. Because most people live in their upper
Totally.
chakras most of the time. They live in that fight or flight response. And for the last year and a half, I've been doing a lot of work with people's nervous systems and getting them embodied in that root. And in my teachings, what happens when we're trying to manifest something is we put the vision out to the universe and we say, okay, this is what I want. And then the universe says, okay, this is what Katie wants. And it starts to send that energy back, and it has to travel down through my channel until it reaches my root. When it reaches my root, it activates into physical reality. And so the reason why I feel like 2025 is going to be a big turning point is because I have all these people showing up doing root chakra work. And they're starting to inhabit as a consciousness more deeply in their root chakra. So I definitely feel like something that we've been working towards for a really long time as a human collective is going to transpire starting next year.
Love it. Love it. And do you feel that is when leaning into manifestation and bringing things into form, that if we're not grounded, we're always going to struggle? Because for me as well, if we're not really grounded here, we're not really a full expression of ourselves or our authentic selves. And then we tend to come from a place of lack and wanting to fill a void
Mhm.
because it's not filled with our wholeness within
Yeah.
ourselves. I'm fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I find when I work with people on manifestation, and even that word has become such a
Yeah.
buzzword in the spiritual community. So it's a hard one for me to even use sometimes. But when I'm working with them, I'm really working on their havingness, what they believe that they can have. And that comes from their heart, right? And their heart is a reflection of their relationship to self. And when they have a bunch of self worth programs that are running in their energy field, they might have a request that goes out to the universe and it makes its way maybe through their mental body, through their upper chakras, through their communication center, but it gets to their heart, and then things start to get a little wonky because they start to have the thing begin to materialize and they start to doubt, or they start to question, or they start to force or push. And then maybe what they've asked for materializes, but it's a little sideways, right? It's a little wonky.
Mm.
And then they get frustrated and they say, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me. That's why it's not manifesting. And then the cycle repeats itself, right? So when we're working on manifestation and we're working through that unworthiness piece, it's important to just surrender to those things as they come up to be cleared and trust that we're not doing anything wrong, right? We haven't gotten it wrong. Our request doesn't mean that we're greedy or that we're bad for asking for that support. We need to come back into that state of surrender and trust. And then over time, as we work through that, we can start to see those things materialize in our physical reality.
Yeah, beautiful. And another question I'd just love to know your thoughts on as well is that as this energy is constantly shifting as we move through this 20-year cycle that you said, right, up to
Mhm.
2032 as well, does that mean through the instability of, like things, I always see things have to break down to break through, and then there's a
Mhm.
reorganization of the pattern just at a higher frequency? That I guess the people that are self-serving, that are not looking at the collective we, not looking at the unified, but looking at this division, are going to start to come into the light from the shadows per se, that we're going to see more and more things come to truth over these next few years.
I do believe that. I think it's already starting to happen. I think with the introduction of so much technology and connection and information, we can find out about things so quickly, which can be a blessing and a curse,
Yeah.
right? Because we have people putting a lot of disinformation and fear out as well. But I do feel like we're going to continue to see an expansion of truth and things coming to light. And, because I look at things through a unified lens, I can see how even the the people who are operating in that deep polarity are serving, and how they're holding that frequency. And as we start to meet them with accountability, but also compassion and not shame, then they will be able to start to make new decisions, because people cannot create through a frequency of shame. So if we're coming at them and warring with them and fighting against them, it's not going to change, because we're amplifying that energy and giving them more power in that, right? So we have to change. Those of us that are open in unity have to change to kind of get release the warrior mentality a little bit in that, and figure out how we can hold the light in a state of truth where we're bringing that clarity and that truth and that accountability to these leaders. And, I did a whole year-long class last year called New Earth Now, and the intention of that was to go through every system and structure that we have on our planet and start to help people pull out of disempowering energies that they may be connected into through those structures. And there were a lot of predictions that came in from the guides in that class, and a lot of them are already coming to pass. Some of the things that I talked about that would happen first would be in the medical system and in the education and governmental systems, that things would start to come to light. And I'm seeing technologies. I mean, the amount of shifts that we're having in medical technology is just astronomical, and it's not getting a lot of press. But if you go out and look, you're finding it. And the same thing with the education system. There's all these alternative education systems that have popped up because of the pandemic. And there's a shift starting and trying to happen in government, but that's going to take a while, because it is one of the most dense layers of systemic, polarity that we have. And, I think in 2025, we're going to start to see some shifts in the financial system. I don't believe that we're going to see a collapse per se, but I do think we're going to see a major shift in our financial system as well.
Yeah. I mean, the only way I look at these things is through, I guess, excitement to a degree, because it means there's something greater that's going to birth out of these, even though if it can be challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, when the lockdown happened and COVID over here, Australia was extremely regimented in their approach. But at the time, when I surrendered to it, we just had the birth of our first child. The lockdowns actually served as a blessing, because I could cocoon, and it was, being able to see. I know other people weren't that fortunate, but it was being able to see it through a different vantage point, and I guess embrace what was actually happening at this point in
Mhm.
time, knowing something good would come of it in the long term, which I feel it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us that have been through any kind of spiritual awakening process know that you go through the dark night of the soul, right? You go through the really difficult thing, and it's that thread of light that you maintain, that thread of faith, that you know that this isn't going to last forever and that it's going to shift. And, the pandemic and the lockdown served so many in having to drop into connection with themselves. We had to be so isolated. And I've worked with a lot of people in the last year and a half to help them get out of that hermit mode, because it became almost too comfortable. And so now I'm seeing this real push where we've got to come together as a community. And I think that we're going to have a lot of world events that are going to force us to do that. I mean, what I'm seeing in my region after this hurricane, like the level of community support and connection and resources being shared, is something unprecedented that I've never witnessed in my lifetime. And so I think there will be events that serve to create that connection and that bond between humanity. And there will be continual things that Mother Earth does to activate that, because as we get connected as a collective, we will then come together to support her and make sure that we're in connection with her and using our
Mm.
resources wisely. And so she's kind of shepherding us through this process. She's already moved through into that fifth dimensional frequency. She's already in New Earth, right? She is New Earth, but we're catching up to her. And so there's a lot of purging that's going to happen through that process for us as individuals and for her as a planet as well.
Love it. You had quite a shift with Mother Earth, didn't you, a couple of years back?
I
Do you
did.
want to just share that as
Yeah.
well? I'm curious to hear. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. My husband and I have been doing work together. We've been sound healers since 2014. That's one of the modalities that we practice
How
as well.
beautiful.
And he's always been kind of the earth tradition person. So he studied with the Kuros in the high Andes mountains. He's a shamanic practitioner. And I've always been the stars, right? I was the channel. I was connecting with the star brothers and sisters and the ascended masters. And I was happy to play that role. But then a couple of years ago in 2022, I had some experiences where I started to activate my connection more deeply with Mother Earth. And in particular, one evening I went outside because I was having a really bad headache in the middle of the night. I woke up, I was in intense pain, worse than a migraine. You know, it was really, really bad. And I went outside just to try to ground and work through the pain. And when I was in that painful place, it kind of put me into an altered state of consciousness. And I was able to open and start to see the other realms that are not able to be visualized in our physical eyes. And Mother Earth said, I've got some codes that you need to bring into your body that you need to disperse to the collective. And as she started channeling this light into my body, I could see them as symbols coming into my body. It shifted me out of the pain, it cleared the headache. And then I had this download that just lived in my body for a couple of months
Wow.
until she shared with me what I needed to do. And at that time, I started the New Earth Now Mystery School, and I started bringing through these codes, which were empowerment codes to separate from the polarity and the disempowering energy of these systems and structures that were created on the earth. And then she has now assigned me that I am to go and get people connected to sacred sites. And so we're doing travel retreats very intentionally to connect people to sacred places on Mother Earth that activate certain energies for them. And so I'm on this kind of secondary mission that Mother Earth has tasked me with. And I spent, quite honestly, the first 6 or 8 months feeling incredibly unworthy of what she asked me to do. And that was a huge process. I had to work through all of my unworthiness and my feeling of like, who am I to be able to be this messenger of your energy? You're so perfect, and I'm just this human. And it was very interesting because I was at the same time also doing work with my mother line and my mother and healing my relationship to my mother, and which is a reflection of my relationship to Mother Earth. And so it was just this very intense time of transformation. And now I have this new mission, I guess, that she's tasked me with, along with, I think, many other light workers on the planet who are also doing similar
Wow.
work.
What sacred sites are you going to?
So in this year we went to Peru and Mount Shasta, and next year we're going to be going to the eastern coast of Costa Rica, near Panama. Actually, we're going very deep south in Costa Rica to get people connected to basically the surrendered divine feminine. Because when Josh and I went there a couple of years ago, it's the most relaxed I've ever been in my feminine energy. So we're going there to get people connected to the land there, and then we're going back to Peru, and we'll be traveling to. So last year we did a divine feminine trip. This year we're going to go to Asangate, which is a divine masculine, Apu, a mountain there, and we're going to be teaching people about working with altars and with their mesa and taking them on a sacred journey, a pilgrimage, if you will, to Peru as well.
Wow, beautiful. And do you
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
with the working with that sacred energy, even just being in his presence can be transforming?
Absolutely. Just, especially the trip to Costa Rica, I keep telling people this is a relaxation, but also a connection. And it's just being in a place that is so deeply held by Mother Earth, it shifts you as a person, even without getting the teachings, even without doing ceremony, which we do all of those things too. But just being in those places and pulling out of our hustle culture that we often live in the city, in that disconnected place, it shifts you at a cellular level and you come back a different person. You can't help but not.
Isn't that interesting? I actually had one of my most profound mystical experiences in Costa Rica, looking back at it.
Mm.
Like going out of body, and it was blew my mind at the time. It actually frightened the shit out of me at the same time. It was like, oh my God, I didn't even know this was possible. So there you go. Isn't
Mm.
that fascinating?
Yeah. Yeah. Mother Earth says that when we go to these places where her energy has been respected, it opens us to a depth of connection that we can't have in modern culture where maybe that connection has been forgotten.
Yeah. One of the retreats where we hold space in a little place called Gaimia here in a little town called Yukai in the rainforest. But
Mm.
the guy had a vision, and basically the Aboriginal ancestors came in and showed him the exact spot and where to build the healing octagon, which is a ley
Mm.
line directly to Ayers Rock. And they've come
Mm.
and tested it since, but it's palpable. The moment you're in that space, it's quite unbelievable. I know what you mean. Last
Yeah.
question for you as well on this. You mentioned receiving codes. And, we often receive activations, codes, energy frequencies moving. How do you see that operating on a physical level? Like, how are they working? Is there an adaptation of the body at a DNA level? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I love this
Oh, cool.
question. Thank you for asking it. So, my understanding of this has evolved over the years as I've experienced more and more downloads and had these really visceral spiritual experiences. What I've come to understand is, I came from a technology background. So, I look at the body as a piece of technology, right? And our nervous system and our physical body, when we have these big astrological events, we go through these Lionsgate portals, these eclipse portals, we're getting an influx of light from our solar system, right? From the sun, actually, which is containing packets of information and data, just like a computer is grabbing data from the internet in packets, right? That light then comes into our body and it begins to activate things that are already held in our DNA and activate dormant things that exist in our body, right? And sometimes that means that we go through a clearing, a purging, because it's activating things that need to be cleared so that we can go to our next state of frequency. And the nervous system is really vital to this. And I believe that one of the positive benefits of the pandemic is that COVID has had a very significant impact on the nervous system, and people are starting to study it more and more. And long COVID and certain things that have come forward, we've really noticed that we have to heal the nervous system to heal those particular experiences that we've had after COVID. And I think that's coming by design because we actually need to do that nervous system work and clear the trauma and create resiliency in our nervous system, because every time we get these downloads of energy, the nervous system experiences that and it can't tell the difference between that and a trauma, because it's just a system receiving a code and it's activated. And so when we have worked on our nervous system and we've worked on our center channel and our energy body, and we've done as much clearing and supportive work as we can, and we have a spiritual practice to continue to support that, we can navigate these light downloads much more easily. And we will go through upgrades. I had an experience about, I guess, a month ago now, where I actually saw them bringing in rainbow light and shifting and taking my DNA apart and putting things back together. I saw it in my third eye. And, about a week and a half later, I had a cold, and I knew intuitively that it was going to last for about 24 to 36 hours. And it was my body's way of completing that upgrade cycle. And my body was intelligent enough to wait until I had 2 days off to actually be able to navigate it. So we're going to continue to see these upgrades happen in our body, and they will be physical. And then we will also have emotional purges as well, where we have, long buried emotions that come to the surface. And we might have days where we're like, gosh, why am I so activated? Why am I so angry? And it will be us processing past things that have gotten stirred up that we need to release so that we can activate these new timelines.
Isn't that interesting? Yes. It's sometimes not pretty, is it? When
No. Most of the time it's not. It's not pretty at all.
I know it's funny the amount of coughing and spluttering that goes on at the retreats and things. People are just letting it go. It's like
Yeah.
get it out. But
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like to put out my monthly energy updates and my weekly videos, because what I find, the people that are attracted into my work, I think are kind of in my soul family,
mhm.
and we process energy at the same time. And so when I start to share that, people can surrender, right? Because they know, oh, I'm not making this up. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one having this experience. And as soon as I bring that information in, they can kind of relax in their nervous system and let the process happen. But when we don't know what's going on, our mind kind of creates a lot of stories because it's been activated by the nervous system and it's trying to work out that fear response. And so when we have a little bit of information about what might be going on in the energetic landscape, we can kind of start to relax and release and
Yeah,
surrender.
beautiful. Last question for you, Katie. Just as
Mhm.
we wrap up the show, with everything we've covered today, and there's a lot, is there anything you want to leave the
Yeah.
listeners to ponder on to finish?
I think I want people to understand that how loved they are by the universe, by source, by the energies that exist beyond us. When I tap into unity consciousness and I feel the connection to all that is, and my heart expands in that, I realize that there's a level of spiritual privilege that I have in being able to have had those experiences. And I wish that I could just bottle that up and give that to everybody so that they can know that they're not alone in this experience, and that if they're waking up to their gifts and they're waking up to a new path or a new timeline for themselves, and they're afraid of making that transformation or that transition, that they're not alone, and that if they can just surrender and let go and trust that everything that is meant for them will always arrive to them and that they will always be supported, then they can kind of make it through the other side of whatever it is that they're going through. I think so many people are suffering and struggling, and my goal in all of my work is to just remember that, help them to remember that they're not alone, and help to empower them on their own personal path. Because I believe that as we wake up to that as individuals and we kind of come into our own medicine, whatever that is for ourselves, and we step into our authenticity and our uniqueness, that's when this world is really going to shift quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll make sure links are in the show notes, but where can people find more of your work, Katie?
Sure. Yeah. The easiest place to get in touch with me is zenwithinacademy.com. You can find all of our retreats, our Costa Rica and Peru retreats. We've got some spaces open for Costa Rica. We have a wait list going for Peru that'll get released soon. We're going in July and August of next year. And then I have a monthly healing circle. You can do an online healing session with me virtually or in person in the Charlotte area. I do book out about 4 months. So I'm a little busy, but there is a cancellation list and Spirit always works it out. So you can send me a note. You can follow me on zenwithinacademy.com and Zen Within Academy at YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And then the New Earth Now School.com.
Amazing. Katie, so lovely to connect with you, mate. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
reaching out. It's
much.
beautiful. Thank you so much.